Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you to our DORA Data Interpretation webinar. We are going to, as the webinar says, focus on DORA today. We do have other webinars available for math, but today is looking at DORA with the idea that your students have assessed in DORA already, or that you are familiar with how to get started and are ready to go more in depth with your students' data. So I want to just start out by sharing my webinar. Hopefully everyone has gotten a chance to download the packet that we provided, that we emailed out. It does have this PowerPoint presentation on it, as well as it has an area for you to take notes about the different portions of the DORA assessment, as well as some tip sheets to help with accessing some of the important reports that we have. If you haven't had a chance to access the handout, please feel free to go ahead and click on the handout section of the webinar, and you can download it there. So if you have it printed out, please take notes, but if you don't, you can always take notes on your own, or we will have this webinar available to review at a later point. So you can always watch it over again and make sure that you haven't missed anything. So we're going to just start out with a quick question, a quick poll to find out a little bit about you guys and your experience so far with Let's Go Learn, to find out if you're new to Let's Go Learn or if you've been using Let's Go Learn for a good period of time and you're really looking to get more in depth with your data, or to just have a nice refresher. So I'm going to send out this poll. This is just going to ask you how long you have been using Let's Go Learn. So this gives you a chance. We'll just wait a few moments for you to fill out whether or not you're new to Let's Go Learn or you've been using it for some time now. So it looks like responses are coming in. We've got some good responses. It looks like we have some veterans here as well as some newbies, but as well we have the majority of the teachers here or administrators here have actually been using Let's Go Learn for about 2 years. So let's see. Okay, so responses are in, and now let me, Erin, can you help me out just real quick? Erin is also with, okay, the poll's complete. So with just sharing the poll for everybody, so they can see the results.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the poll really quick, and I'm going to share the results a little right now. And as Alicia said, about 50% of you have been here for 2 years, so welcome back. And a few of you have been here for 4+ years, so once again, definitely welcome back, and hopefully you'll learn something new today. And it looks like we have 25% are 0, and you guys are brand new. So, Alicia, I'm going to close this off, and I'm going to pass it right back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, so I just wanted to follow that up with introducing myself and my experiences with Let's Go Learn. So my name is Alicia Atkinson. I am a customer success specialist for Let's Go Learn. I'm part of the customer success team. And each of you most likely have a customer success specialist that you work with. And I'm one of the members of the team. You are always welcome to reach out to any of us. We work together. But I've been with Let's Go Learn for a year. But prior to joining Let's Go Learn, I was a teacher and an administrator for 10 years. So I do have classroom experience as well as experience on the administrative level with using data. So for me, as a former teacher, I really find this data from DORA incredibly important, incredibly useful, as well as from an administrative standpoint, being able to look at the student on a grander scale is very helpful. So it gives you a really good snapshot of where your students are, and then allows you to drill down deeply to guide instruction. So we're going to get started just talking about DORA. We'll start with just talking about why we assess. So we talk about this assessment and instruction cycle. There's different types of assessment. You have accountability and summative assessments. These are your assessments that you give at the end of instruction. So we look at these as lag data. This data gives you information about what happened in the past, but it's not data that you can necessarily change. Once those scores come in from your accountability tests, be they benchmark tests or state standard tests or any of those really standardized tests that the students take, there's nothing you can do to change the data. It's in, you use it for accountability, and gives you a snapshot of the students, but it's not necessarily used to guide instruction. Conversely, diagnostic and formative data is used to guide instruction. It's given prior to instruction or at certain points throughout the instruction period to gauge progress, to see where students, and also to see where students are starting. So this data can be affected by classroom instruction based on what you know about the data. So when you know that a student is starting at a particular place, and you know where you want them to go, which would be your standards, and the standards that we're talking about in this slide can be your state standards, your Common Core standards, but also your teaching standards, your expectations for the student. So where do you want each individual student to be at the end of the instruction period? What are your expectations for them? So you need to know where the students are starting and where they're going in order to get them there. And so we assess, and then we instruct, and then we assess again to see how instruction went. We use that assessment to guide us in our instruction, and this cycle continues throughout the year, or actually throughout the child's lifetime of learning. Now, I also like to look at this as a roadmap. You need to know your point A, where the student is starting, and your point B, your standards, in order to create an instructional path. And that path can have checkpoints along the way using those diagnostic and formative assessments. So you start with an assessment like DORA, determine where your students are, plan your instruction, check in throughout the year to make sure that students are progressing, and then ideally, the students have reached the standards and expectations that you hold for them by the end of the year. Now, one of the many things that makes DORA different from other standards models of assessment is that it's adaptive. So traditionally, your standard assessment is going to assess students on grade level material. And I will tell you if they have reached that grade level material, if they're capable of completing that material. If they are within grade level, they can do some things in that grade level, but not everything, or if they've mastered that grade level material. What it doesn't tell you is that whether or not the student is capable of doing things much higher above grade level, and if so, where their instructional point is above grade level, as well as if they haven't reached grade level material or they can't access grade level material, what kind of material can they access? What DORA does is DORA finds their instructional point within each of these subtests and from high-frequency words, phonics, word recognition, spelling, vocabulary, comprehension, as well as we offer phonemic awareness and fluency. But it's not an exact instructional point. Reading is not a single skill. There are many skills that work together for a confident and efficient reader. Students need to be able to access the high-frequency words, understand phonics, decode, spell, have a good vocabulary, and have comprehension skills. All of those work together to inform what a student is capable of reading. And so we need to know all of those different points, and they can vary. A student isn't necessarily at the same level in all of these areas. So when interpreting this data, though, you need to understand each of these subtests. So on your handout, we do have a copy of all of a report where you can take notes about what each of these subtests mean. And I'm going to go over these subtests, but I'm also going to go over the biases that affect whether a student scores. So every assessment has bias. There's no way around that. But we want to make clear what ours are and how they affect the scores so that you can really interpret this data. It's not just a number, but it's a data related to a student, and it has meaning. So the first thing that's not on this list, but is our first subtest, is the high-frequency words. So these high-frequency words are from first grade, kindergarten, first grade level up through the end of third grade. So once a student has reached a 3.83 level on their DORA high-frequency word subtest, that means that they've maxed out. So they have achieved they can recognize all of their high-frequency words. We don't have 12th grade or 9th grade high-frequency words. That we do have, word recognition for that, but our high-frequency words max out at 3.83. Now, one thing that can affect a student's score is their computer skills. High-frequency words are the only timed subtest on DORA, and so if a student isn't working quickly or isn't aware that it's timed or has difficulty with computer skills, then that can affect their score because they can be marked as wrong if they don't answer the question fast enough. Our next, the next skill or subtest on DORA is word recognition. Now, word recognition really skyrockets once a student is a fluent decoder. But all it is a student's ability to read words. This has nothing to do with their ability to understand the meaning of the word. So once a student is a fluent decoder, their score is going to go up very quickly. It means that they can recognize just about every word out there if they have a 12th grade level word recognition score, but it does not mean that they should be reading 12th grade level books. It just means that they can read those words, they can decode them. So usually around 2nd or 3rd grade, whenever that student, really hits that spark or that point where their reading, their decoding takes off, their score will go up very quickly. But it's very important to make sure that you know and parents know that this score is not a reading level. It is whether or not the student can decode words. The next subtest is the phonics subtest. So the phonics subtest also maxes out at a certain point, and its max is 4.83. So we teach phonics up through 4th grade when we're looking at multisyllabic words. So this assessment will look at the different phonics skills that a student needs from beginning sounds through multisyllabic words and determine what skills the students have. Also, we have the phonemic awareness portion of the assessment. This is a section that is given to all students K through 2, and then for students 3rd grade and above, if their decoding skills, if their high frequency word phonics or word recognition skills, put them at a second grade or below reading level. Then we want to check on their phonemic awareness skills. Now, the phonemic awareness section is the only section that is not given in a grade level score. Instead, it's given in a percentage. It's a percentage of 9 questions. So all the other sections are adaptive. But for the phonemic awareness section, students are given 9 questions, and the score is just how many of them they got right. So if they have a 77.77, that means they got 7 out of the 9 questions right. And we will look in deeper to see what these questions are when we look at the decoding error analysis report. So the next section that I want to cover is spelling. Overall, spelling is a difficult subject for students. And the scores tend to be low. One of the reasons, there's several reasons. One of them is that spelling is a generative process, and especially with our assessment, and when you give a spelling test, a student has to hear the word, comprehend what that word is, have seen the word before so that they know the correct spelling, be able to come up with that correct spelling, and then produce that spelling onto the keyboard and spell it correctly. So many things can affect it. Auditory processing, computer skills. There's a lot that goes into spelling. Now, we also assess regular and irregularly spelled words. So there's an opportunity for students to make mistakes because irregularly spelled words can be very difficult. English is a difficult language to spell. So we tend to see students having low spelling skills. As well, many schools, and I don't know how it applies to each of your schools, but many schools stop teaching spelling around the same time that they stop teaching phonics. So they really focus on phonetic spelling, and then when they're done with phonics, they're done teaching spelling. Not very many 9th grade classes teach spelling. Now, some middle school classes may teach spelling in the basis of root words and vocabulary, but often they're focused more on the vocabulary aspect of these root words as opposed to the spelling aspect. So we really see spelling skills often plateau at around 4th grade because students are not being taught spelling after that point. As well, we have a tendency to teach spelling in a very direct spelling list sort of way, and that's not always effective. I like to tell a little story about how my son came home from school the other day and told me very excitedly that he got 100% on his spelling test. I said, told him great job, and I asked him what his spelling words were, and he had no idea. He had no idea what the words were that he was supposed to spell. He just knew that he had spelled them correctly and basically had, sounded them out. He's in a younger grade, so they were very regularly spelled words. But he didn't retain any of that information. Now, as well, there are effective ways to teach spelling, but it requires a lot of work and a changing of the way that your school culture teaches spelling. Now, some schools do a great job of this, but in general, it is something that we struggle with in the English language. All right, I want to just take a little pause and see if anyone has any questions, either questions or want to make any comments in the chat area, because I know that there's a lot of material to go over. So does anyone have any questions? I'll give about
Alicia,
30 seconds for that. Yes.
No questions have came in, but I do want to remind everyone that you are able to add your questions on the GoToWebinar panel by going to the question section, and feel free to type them out, and I will interject Alicia when appropriate.
Okay, so I will give just a couple of seconds, but hopefully it's been clear. I just want to make sure I cover any questions before I go on to the next section, which is vocabulary and comprehension, because these are very important and I want to be clear about how DORA addresses these concepts. All right, well, it doesn't seem like anyone has any questions, so I am going to move on. So our next two subtests within DORA are vocabulary and comprehension. Now, I want to be very clear that unlike other reading assessments, and especially comprehension passages, DORA separates grade level vocabulary from grade level content and complexity. So this means that our comprehension passages do not have high level vocabulary in them. Instead, we assess vocabulary through oral vocabulary, so that students who cannot read can even show their oral vocabulary skills through the picture vocabulary. As well, students who are struggling with vocabulary are not penalized on their comprehension, because often it can happen that a student's comprehension scores are falsely low because they struggle with English vocabulary. So this can apply for students who perhaps English is a second language. One of the examples that we used is we had a school where the students were scoring very highly on the comprehension section, and the school felt that this couldn't be true because on all of their other assessments, the reading passages, the students were scoring at a second grade level, where on ours they were scoring at 10th grade level. Well, it turned out that these students were at summer school in North America, but they were from Asia. So they were learning English, and then they came to work on their English skills. And so they had about a second grade level English vocabulary, but they really did have 10th grade level comprehension skills in their native language, but also with their ability to read English. They were able to read English, but not necessarily understand that 10th grade level English vocabulary. So this really allows students who just struggle with English vocabulary to express their comprehension skills, because there are many different skills related to comprehension. As well, students may struggle with decoding, but still have good comprehension. So one thing that you can do, and I will show how to do this later, is work on grouping students for comprehension or using read alouds to work on students' comprehension skills, even if they have low decoding skills. Now, when it comes to the vocabulary scores, young students tend to have a greater vocabulary compared to their reading ability. So they understand a lot of words, they are constantly talking. Families with young children tend to talk to their children more and be more direct with them, whereas as students get older, they tend to, number one, talk with their parents and teachers less, and they tend to focus on social vocabulary instead of academic vocabulary. So this doesn't mean that they don't have vocabulary skills, it's just not focused in the areas that we are looking for. So we, try and reduce the bias in our vocabulary. Now, of course, there are going to be some words that certain families use or certain schools use that others don't in terms of academic vocabulary. But if we were to focus on social vocabulary, the bias would be extreme because social vocabulary is constantly changing and is different from area to area, school to school. So what tends to happen is that older students' vocabulary scores tend to plateau around 5th grade, maybe 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So middle school students really struggle with their academic vocabulary. And there are ways to use social vocabulary to teach students how to look at new vocabulary words, but you have to figure out what works best in your school culture to increase students' academic vocabulary. And families, who do continue to be very verbal and students who are very verbose do tend to have higher vocabulary. And of course, English language status will affect their vocabulary scores on DORA. Now on to really looking at comprehension. So while I said that our comprehension passages don't rely on grade level vocabulary, they do increase in complexity as the grade level passages increase. So a first grade passage is going to be shorter and less complex than a fifth grade level passage. Our passages are nonfiction, and the reason for this is that we want to avoid bias as best as possible. Of course, prior knowledge will play a factor. A student could potentially have enough prior knowledge about a passage to be able to pass it without really having good comprehension from reading that passage. But generally, the nonfiction does help reduce bias based on students' ability to relate to the characters in the story or to the dialogue in the story. Also, one thing that's very important to let the students know and to take into consideration is that there is no look back. Now, this is a part of the assessment that many teachers are confused by because most standard assessments allow students to look back at the passage to find the answers to the comprehension question. And we teach this skill when we're looking at nonfiction passages quite often. And this is an excellent skill to teach. This is a research skill. Students are going to need this skill, especially as they move further on in their education and their reading of textbooks or articles, research articles become more complex. They need to know how to find the information related to their thesis or related to, the subjects they're looking at quickly by scanning and looking for answers to different questions. However, that is research, not necessarily comprehension. And we want to make sure that we are assessing a student's comprehension ability, their ability to read a passage thoroughly, retain the information, and then be able to discuss or answer questions about it. Our comprehension section does allow the students to reread the passage as many times as they want. However, once they click done and move on to the questions, they cannot go back to the passage. This means that the number one predictor of how their comprehension scores will go is whether they've read the passage. That is the first tool in comprehension, is to actually read the passage. So it's important to look and see if the student has read the passage when analyzing their comprehension scores. And therefore, we will show you a tool, a report that will show how long the student spent reading their passage, as well as the average time they spent on each question. The questions are read aloud to them, so if they're having trouble decoding some of those, the items in the question, it's read aloud. If a student doesn't take the time to allow the questions to be read to them, that's usually an indication that they are guessing. And especially on those earlier passages where the students may have trouble with decoding, they're probably not reading very quickly and then moving on to the question. So it is a good way to assess whether or not the students are putting forth effort. And we all know that effort has a huge effect on student scores. And the purpose of DORA is to get accurate scores so that you can use that information to guide to guide instruction. And we need that to be accurate if you're putting students in groups based on this assessment. So I'm going to stop right there, give about 15 seconds for any questions about our vocabulary and comprehension sections before I move on. Or Erin, if you have anything to chime in.
One question that typically gets brought up when when the students are taking DORA in under high frequency words, which most educators just call them sight words, is what word list do we typically use? And we did want to let everyone know that we are currently using the Fry's word list in order to assess a student's high frequency words, sight words.
Excellent. Thank you for chiming that in, Erin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the different reports that we have for DORA. So we do have a summary report that just goes quickly over each of the subtests and gives the student, marks whether or not the students are within grade level on each subtest and where they are. Now, this can be shared with students with or without scores. So if you just want to give students an area of focus, you can share it without the scores, or if you want to really focus in on the grade level for that student, want them to be aware of their grade levels, you can share it with scores. We also have a teacher report that is pretty lengthy, gives a lot of detail. Some teachers, really find this useful, but we do, I do believe that this report is going to be leaving us soon. And instead, we're going to focus on our new parent report. Our new parent report is pretty concise, and if you've used DORA before, the old parent report and teacher report were about 18 pages. This one's closer to 3. And what it does is it gives recommended activities for students or parents to do with their students. So it's great for sharing with parents. It's also great for teachers to get ideas. Now, this can be shared with scores or without scores as well. Then we have a standards report. This just checks through the standards, either your state standards or the Common Core standards, and lets you know which standards the student has mastered based on DORA. We have the profiles, we use letters to group the students based on their skills, whether or not they're at grade level or within grade level or above in a certain skill, or if they are below grade level. So we group these skills into decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension, and we group the students based on those skills. Now, we also do have a way to access that data and sort it in other ways through our raw scores report, and that is part of our data portal. And so we do have an opportunity to sort the scores basically however you would like using the raw scores report. Now, our last 2 reports really focus on diving down into each assessment and determining the student's skills and what kind of information they were given, or questions they were asked. So our decoding error analysis report allows you to look at their phonemic awareness and phonics sections in DORA and drill down and sort students that way. And our comprehension subtest analysis report looks at whether or not students missed questions on factual questions, inferential questions, as long as how long they spent reading the passage and how long on average they spent answering the questions, and what their score on each passage was, what percentage they got right on each passage. As well, I do want to note that our comprehension passages each are followed by 6 questions, 3 of which are factual, 2 which are inferential, and 1 that is embedded vocabulary. This means that the student does not need to know the meaning of the vocabulary word before reading the passage. The vocabulary word is contextual, explained in the passage, and so we look at whether or not they're able to glean the meaning of the word from the passage. So we will be going over each of those reports. So I'm going to actually exit out now, and we're going to go into one of our demo accounts so that you can see the data in action. So it looks like I was logged into another account. I will log out of this account and go into our demo account.
You know, while Alicia logs in, one thing that I did want to mention regarding the comprehension is, in addition of having passages ranged from first grade to 12th grade, we have 3 sets of those passages. So that means that a student will see an entirely different passage the second time as well as the third time around when they're taking the DORA assessment.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go here to DORA because that's the data that we're looking at right now. And we're going to look at how our scores are presented. So we have green scores indicate that the student has maxed out at that level. So for high frequency words, as I mentioned, 3.83, phonics, 4.83, and the rest of the sections are at a, go all the way up to the end of 12th grade, as well as phonemic awareness. Here it shows not tested because these students were in 5th grade when they took the assessment, and so they were not given the phonemic awareness section. But we can look at the students who have been given that section a little later. So if you'd like to sort the scores just based on a certain subtest, you're welcome to do that here. You can just use the arrows here, and this will sort the students based on their scores, either up or down. It's up to you how you want to sort it. But this, we'll sort so if we're just sorting word recognition, that's how you would sort that. Now I'm going to just move quickly to the reports because we want to get going through this, and I'm going to look at the summary report. So you can download the summary report as a PDF, or you can have it straight to the screen, and we're going to look at it with scores. So this shows the student score as well as how they did on the phonics principles, and then the areas when you see a red X that indicates that the student has work to do, that they are below grade level in this area. Whereas the green check mark means that they're within a year of their grade level or they're above grade level. As well, it lets you know on the reading comprehension portion, what types of errors did they make. So this student, 50% of their errors were factual and 50% were inferential. The nice thing is it does give a little bit of information about each subtest and some of the questions that the student answered correctly or incorrectly. For example, in spelling, it shows that this student spelled cautious this way instead of, it was missing the U in cautious, but was able to spell the word trouble correctly. Also for vocabulary, was able to identify meaning of certain words, these words, but not these other words. So as well, it just lets you know, okay, were they tested in awareness? The student was not. So this is great for sharing with the students. Now, if you want to just print a class batch, you can just click on class summary, and that will give you all your students, and you can print them at once. I also want to just show the new parent report, include the recommended activities. So for this one, for this student, it's very similar. However, it does give you some information about how the student makes meaning and some goals for the student, as well as what their profile means at their age level, and some specific recommended activities for the student. So this is a great tool both for parents and teachers. This is a great report. Now our standard report on this one, you can choose your standards. For example, if we want to do Common Core, and I'm here in the state of California, so I want to look at the California Common Core standards. And this student took the test in 5th grade, but I want to see, okay, what, say, 4th grade to 6th grade standards has she mastered? So I'm going to look at these standards, and it will check off the standards that she's mastered. And then here we can see if she hasn't mastered grade level words at a 4th grade level, as well as she has mastered some 6th grade skills in informational text, but spelling is also still, she's not at 6th grade level spelling, but she does have some 6th grade level vocabulary skills or standards already mastered. So this gives you an idea of some of the standards that are presented within DORA and what skills the student has mastered already. Okay, and now I'm going to go back and look at those profiles. But before I do that, I do want to point out that you can look at a student's assessment over time, because a student is not just one assessment. We know that they can have bad days, their effort changes. What we really want to see is, are the students making progress? How are they going, how are they progressing? So we can look at their previous assessments to see, okay, is this assessment really accurate? Are they making progress? So here, the student has taken 2 assessments, mastered high-frequency words both times, really skyrocketed in word recognition. That's reasonable. Phonics, their second test was a little bit lower, but it wasn't really off. But it gives you an idea, okay, they probably have phonics mastered. As well, spelling's increased a little bit, vocabulary has increased, and comprehension has increased. So this comprehension, was low. The student does have low comprehension, but it is improving. All right, so I just wanted to point that out real quick so that you can track that student progress. Now we're going to look at these class profiles. So these students are grouped based on, like I said, decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension. So a student who's in the A group will be at least 1 grade level below in decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension, while the H student is an on grade or above grade level reader in decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension. However, we also have groups for all the different combinations. So for example, we see this a lot. We see most of the students are in this C group. They can decode, they've got grade level vocabulary, but their area of struggle is comprehension. Now we want to look, okay, well, where in comprehension are these different students? So we click on the C, and this will give us the list of the students and their scores. So we can see here that these students, while they're low in comprehension, they range from, and we can sort the scores. So they range from 1st grade, several students who are at a 1st grade level comprehension, up through many students who are at a 3rd grade level, and one student who took the assessment much later at an 8th grade level who was at a 4.5. So but if we look here, these students might be grouped together because they have 3rd grade level comprehension skills. So this allows you to group the students and then group the students further. And as well, you can do this using the raw scores report, which I'm just going to point out where it's found. I'm not going to go over it, but it is found in the data portal. So in the data portal, depending on which data portal package level your school has, everyone does have access to the raw scores report, but where you would find it, kind of what it looks like here will vary. But the raw scores report is an Excel export that allows, so here is the raw score export. So that allows you to download those raw scores and sort them as you need to. We're going to come back and we're going to look now at our last 2 reports that really dive in and look further. So we're going to come here to reporting, come to teacher, and we're going to look here at our DORA decoding error analysis report first. Now I'm going to pick a couple of grades to look at, just so that we're looking at a variety of students. Now this is our demo account, so the data is a little old, so I'm going to really look back pretty far. And if I leave this like for the end date, it'll be today's date. And we're going to look at all our grades, and we're going to just pick out a few. So we'll pick out our 6th grade class, 3rd grade class, and our 2nd grade class. to get an eye on different types of students. And I think I picked, oh, you know what, I know that one of these classes has dirty data, so let's try this again. There we go. Okay, that class doesn't like this report, and there's some dirty data in there. Okay, so so these are, you know, students that were probably in first grade at the time that they took the assessment. So they were given all these students were given the phonemic awareness assessment, except for this student. So this student must have been in the higher grade at the time. Oh, this is a demo student. So this student is actually an adult taking the assessment recently. So here we can look at the different phonemic awareness questions that are asked. So we have phoneme isolation, phoneme identity, phoneme categorization, phoneme blending, phoneme segmentation, deletion, addition, substitution, and rhyming. So if you're working with students on phonics, you can sort the students and see who needs to work on which skill by just clicking on that skill. So if we're looking at our students with phoneme isolation, we need to work on that. We would double click here. And all of the students who have a minus, that means that they did not correctly answer the phoneme isolation section. But perhaps that, you know, we can see here, just because the student missed phoneme isolation doesn't mean that they don't know phoneme deletion and addition. So you can go then, you know, check another section. All right, so we have several students that need work on phoneme rhyming. Now, with the phonics section, we can look at their different phonetic principles that they answered questions on. Many of the students are going to have NP not tested. That means that they have assumed mastery of this. So this student, Autumn, we look at her scores. She only missed multisyllabic words. She really didn't need to be tested on, you know, the letter P. But we have other students that did need that. So we're going to look here. The NP is going to come up first when we click on it, when we go to the minus. So we do want to scroll down. Probably most of these students weren't. So we're going to look here for these minuses. All right, so if we're doing the letter D, these students here with those minuses are the students who need to work on the letter D. With over here, though, in the phonetic principles, once the student gets to a certain point, if they, depending on their grade level when they're testing, when they answer questions, it will adjust up until they get something wrong or adjust down until they get something right. And everything below that is assumed mastery. So if we're sorting here for long vowels, we're going to be doing a lesson on long vowels, we can click, look at, okay, so who is missing long vowels? Well, we've got quite a few students who are missing long vowels, but we really only have one student where this is the skill that they are at, that they need to be working. So long vowels, it would be a very small group. It would be this one student who has pluses behind and minuses above. But if we look at short vowels, we have several students who have these minuses. So we'll work, or these pluses right before. So we're going to sort here and look, okay, where are our students who need most of their beginning sounds? And then we have some students here who need short vowel help. So you really want to look, you know, I'm clicking around, but you really want to look for students who have that plus minus together to see for whom it is an appropriate group. So where the plus and minus meet, that's going to be their instructional level. Now with multisyllabic words, this is where you're going to have, you know, most of the students who are in younger grades are not going to be ready for it, but you do have some students who have mastered multisyllabic words, but a few for whom this is the appropriate area of instruction, right, where that plus and minus move together. So this is very helpful for making phonics groups or phonemic awareness groups. And then our last report that I think is incredibly important and fascinating, really helps to analyze the comprehension scores, is the DORA Comprehension Subtest Analysis Report. And we do have a tip sheet on how to access this on in that packet. So we're going to look here at that. Let's see if that 6th grade class wants to be available for us, or if we have to look at, you know, I'm going to try a different class. That 6th grade class hasn't been kind to me lately. So let's see how this class looks. Okay, excellent. This is a great example class. So we're looking here at this class that, you know, when they took the assessment, most of them were 4th graders. So what we're going to see here is that RT reading time, this right here, is in minutes, where QT is their average question response time for 5 out of the 6 quickest responses. So that's going to be in seconds. We have their percentage score as well. So we consider 70% and above as passing. Below that, the student is not considered to pass that assessment. So we have the student's grade when they took the assessment, the version of the story, as Erin said, we have 3 different versions, so they're not getting the same story every time, even if they're reading at the same level, the number of factual errors, and the number of inferential errors. Now, if these numbers are the same, that actually indicates that they're having more difficulty with inferential because there are less inferential questions. So this looks like this student with 3 factual errors, 2 inferential errors. Well, that's basically even according to our assessment, that they have struggled evenly with that skill. So here's what we really want to look at. We want to look at the student's reading time to determine if they read the passage. If we look here at this student, they spent 0.11 minutes reading the passage. That is less than 10 seconds. That is not enough time to actually read the passage. Students spent about 8-9 seconds on the questions and scored a 30%. That indicates that this score of 1.5 is probably inaccurate. Now, it could be accurate in that the passage is just too difficult for the child, but oftentimes it's an indication that it is not an accurate indication of their reading level. As well, let's see if we have any students who rushed through their questions. If they rushed through their questions, here we go. Here's an example student. This student spent 0.1 minutes reading the passage, i.e. this student spent 6 seconds, and spent less than 5 seconds on each question, and got a 30%. And when we look at this student, we can see that this is a pattern. This student started the 7th grade level passage, didn't really read it, moved down, didn't read that 6th grade level passage, and then realized, oh wait, maybe I should read the passage, spent a minute on the 5th grade passage, which is reasonable, spent time on each question, and was able to get 100%. So this indicates that the student most likely has a higher reading level than this. The other thing that you want to look out for is students who have a really, really high reading time, more than, say, 7 minutes, or even 7 minutes might be high for a lower level passage. So it looks like this student here spent a really long time on the passages. It's possible the student spent this amount of time reading, but it's also possible the student spent this amount of time not paying attention, doing something else, maybe doing something else in their head or physically doing something else. For example, if a teacher allows the student to do something fun after the assessment is done, say go play, the student may just leave the assessment and go play instead of reading the passage. So this is an indication that something else is going on as well. So you do want to look out for really high times and really low short time. Okay, so that's a basic summary of data analysis for DORA. I'm going to open it up for questions again, and hopefully you guys found this very helpful. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, though, you can feel free to log off, but I will stay around for a couple of minutes for questions. Or Erin, if you have anything else to chime in.
No, not at all. Kind of like what Alicia said, thanks for everyone who's showing up. If you do decide to leave with us and not stick around, you will be given a quick survey at the very end that will pop up. And yeah, feel free to let us know how we did so we can improve our sessions. And Maria has said thanks. So welcome, everyone.
All right. Do you see one more question? I saw a question. Oh, okay. Where to find the reports I was just discussing? Yes.
Excellent question.
So here up in reporting, we come to teacher. So reporting, teacher. And then we have under summaries, we have our DORA decoding error analysis report and our DORA comprehension subtest analysis. As well, if you do, I didn't point this out, but if you do use things like guided reading levels or Lexile levels, you can access estimated equivalencies here at the DORA reading level score estimated equivalence report, as well as in the data portal. It is listed on the raw scores report. Okay, here's another question. So the Fontes and Pinnell, so yes, so Fontes and Pinnell level, the letters under the profile are not the same as the Fontes and Pinnell levels. No, they are not. However, we do have Fontes and Pinnell levels under here, the estimated equivalents that are related to those letters. We have two ways of assessing that. We do have what we have is guided reading 1, GR1, which just looks at comprehension, and guided reading 2 that kind of looks at more of the assessment, kind of looks at their decoding as well as their comprehension to determine a guided reading level for them. So if you are using level books, you can use the DORA data to help you with making groups that way and picking level books for your students. But one of the things is to keep in consideration is, okay, so the question where we find the scores. So this DORA under reporting teacher, we have the DORA reading level score estimated equivalent, and we'll look at that 5th grade class. And you can leave the date blank. And so this has, using multiple levels, this determines that the student's guided reading level would be an M for Fontes and Pinnell, or if you use things like DRA, reading recovery, Lexile, it provides different ways of leveling books. The same information is available under reporting, the data portal, and it does show in the raw scores report. So here the raw scores export does give those same reading levels as well. But like I said, as I was saying, when you are making groups, sometimes you do need to take into consideration that those levels are very general, whereas our profiles really looks at what specific skills do they need to focus on. Do these students need to focus on vocabulary, comprehension, or decoding? And you can put students in multiple groups depending on what you're working on. So if you're working on decoding, students might be in one group, but they might be in a different group if you're working on comprehension, and then a completely different group of students if your focus is vocabulary. Okay, well, these are great questions. Thank you. Okay, so a certificate to indicate that you completed the webinar. Erin, can you answer that, or do you have that information?
No, that's actually a really great question as well as suggestion. And actually, I will bring that up to the team, or Alicia and I will bring it up to the team so that we can actually address that. But I suspect that's something that we can take care of, actually. So thank you for the great suggestion.
So, yeah, if you need to let your administrators know that you have taken the webinar, they can contact us and we can let them know that you were here. But in the future, we will definitely look at at having us retract it.
Absolutely.
So how do they get a copy of the webinar?
Great question. So what we'll do is as soon as we stop recording, we will be uploading this onto our PD site. Alicia, can you show everyone how to get to the PD site, please?
Yeah.
The home tab of
So let's go, if you go to letsgolearn.com, and I just realized that, oh, actually, from their home tab here?
Yeah.
Okay. So here on your home tab for your account, the Professional Development Center
yes.
is right here. And so we do have training videos here. And so then the webinars we'll
probably replace, we'll replace the one under the Data Interpretation tab.
Okay.
All the way on top.
Okay, so the Interpreting Data tab, yep. So we have a current video recorded webinar, but we will replace these with updated, this newest one.
Great question.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Hopefully I got to everyone's questions. And I hope you found this helpful. Okay.
Welcome, everyone.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.